Hello, this is Brian K. Vaughan, writer of Why the Last Man, Ex Machina, Paper Girls, Saga, and a bunch of other crap. And you are listening to the best podcast in the universe, the Oblivion Bar Podcast.
Welcome to the Oblivion Bar Podcast with your host, Chris Hacker and Aaron Knowles.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 165 of the Oblivion Bar Podcast. I'm your last man alive with no one but my pet capuchin, Chris Hacker. And joining me this week is a decorated coalition war hero and the lead vocalist of Fartbox, my co-host and BFF, Aaron Knowles.
Am I shitting? It feels like I'm shitting.
And that's how a dream was made reality, Aaron. That's
Yes.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Oblivion Bar Podcast. This week on the show, no surprise, if you've seen the title, you know exactly who's here to join us here on the Oblivion Bar Podcast. One of my ultimate bucket list creators, my all-time favorite writer in comics, all-time favorite writer overall, the writer of Ex Machina and Paper Girls. Seasons of Lost, Private Eye, Pride of Baghdad, I said Paper Girls, Spectators over on Substack, Why the Last Man, of course, Saga, Aaron, which is why Brian K. Vaughan is here on the Oblivion Bar Podcast this week.
It's exciting. It's fucking exciting. I can't wait to hear about the process because you're about to tell us the process of getting the Brian K. 14-time Eisner winning creator. Like, holy shit. Like, this man's a fucking legend.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've said before, I don't think it's really a secret that Brian doesn't do a ton of podcasts. I've seen him hop on one every once in a while, and I had to pull some strings behind the scenes. I hate to gatekeep all of my resources behind the scenes, but I had to reach out to multiple folks to make this happen. And it was such a wonderful feeling when I got that email from Brian saying, yeah, I would love to come on and talk about Saga, which is why he's here today. As we said a moment ago, we have the return of Saga with issue 67 coming out the Wednesday that you're listening to this episode. So that following Wednesday, Saga will be back from a pretty lengthy hiatus. I think it's been most of 2024 that Saga has not been out and about coming out every month. So very exciting. I say it here in the conversation, Aaron, and you know this because I've done it to you. When someone comes to me and they say, Chris, I want to get into comics. What should I read? You know, and I don't hand them Batman. I don't hand them, Swamp Thing. I don't hand them Watchmen. I don't hand them The Dark Knight Returns or Spider-Man Blue or all 4 seasons, Superman. Like I don't hand them any of that, right? I hand them Saga.
Yeah.
Because I think Saga represents what the medium does so incredibly well. I think it's the perfect representation. It's the greatest mascot for comics and what it does, why it's so special and why it's so incredible.
It's also super accessible. Saga is one of those ones that it's not an old story. It's not a story that's been retold multiple times. It's not a universe that's been rebooted. It is literally a self-confined universe that you can jump into, like, and it's a pretty recent thing, so it's like not hard to find. It's not like you have to go all the way back to like 1960s to find like Superman #1. Right. No, like it's in omnibuy, it's in hardcovers, it's like
it's a compendium.
You could probably go to a library, and it's that popular. You could probably go to a library and find it on it, like their graphic novel or comic book section. And it's just the story itself is relevant, it's accessible, it's modern, it's telling, it's inclusive, it's just
funny, it's sad.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right that this is just a story that is a perfect mascot for the comic industry and everything that it can be.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that if you love Saga, for some reason, if you're listening to this conversation and you've only read Saga by Brian, or if you haven't read Saga, for instance, first of all, I would imagine that you shouldn't be listening to this right now because we go full spoilers. I should just say that right at the top, that when we dive into this conversation with Brian, I say it in the conversation, I'll say it again here. I could not forgive myself if I had Brian here on the show and not talk about at least up to issue 54, which readers of Saga know that issue 54 is an extremely important issue, that a lot of things happen. And again, I wouldn't be able to have him on here and not at least sort of pick his brain on a lot of what his process is, how Fiona was reacting to this, all the things which we get into here in this conversation. So
You'll need a tissue for that issue.
that's correct. Yeah. If you got that issue, you're going to need a tissue because
Yes.
it's something. Not to
Don't
spoil
cry.
anything right now,
Dry your eye.
but yeah. So Brian, and we'll probably talk about it later on after the conversation. But I'm extremely proud of this interview.
You should be.
It went about as perfect. Thank you. It went about as perfectly as it could have. There was no uncomfortability. He was totally like Brian from the moment that he hopped on screen, he just exposed his underbelly and let me into his brain. And you get that here in this conversation.
There's going to be like in the intro of the conversation, you just drop like a total F-bomb.
Yeah, I do.
And I'm just like, like my first reaction is, oh fuck, Chris. But then like he's totally in on it. Like it's like he's sold and he's in on the conversation. He's comfortable and it's great. So
Yeah.
I am excited for people to get the chance to listen to this. And again, it's not too often that it's more often than you are. It's not too often that I'm on the outside, like looking in and listening to these interviews, not having been a participant in this conversation. But I gotta say, man, you like, and again, I'll tell you this after the conversation as well. You knocked this one out of the park, man. You killed it.
Thank
You absolutely killed it. Like all I'm thinking is while I'm, when the conversation's wrapping up is, he doesn't fucking need me on this show, man.
I said it last week that the only thing that I would have changed about this Brian interview is that it would have been better if you had been there. But I don't
think so. I would have been like the bumbling idiot, like liar,
lying.
Like I would have nothing. Like I would not have much to offer to this in this conversation. And I really think, as the Saga super fan, that I'm going to call you, like I'm going to label you as the Saga super fan, the Brian K. Vaughan super fan, the eloquent comic fan that you are. You fucking killed this interview. And honestly, like I didn't need to be there for this one. It's better that I didn't, because this was like again, we'll talk about it. This was a bucket list moment for you, and well deserved, well done. And fucking, we got some news coming up for the Patreons. I don't want to segue too early into it, but we got some news for our listeners, for our Patreon members, for everybody.
Go ahead, get into it. Tell everyone what's going on, because this episode is extremely important, but it's equally, I would say equally as important, not only because Brian is here, because we have a little bit of news here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say that, like, so we're about to take a little bit of a break while Chris, everybody should already know that Chris is going through some chemotherapy treatments right now. Sorry, it's still a little tough for both of us, at least for me to talk about. He seems to be fine.
He looks cute. I don't know.
He looks great. He fucking looks great for it. Even Brian talks about this.
Am I attracted to a chemo kid right now?
Fuck yeah, I'm always dug you, Chris. But no, you're about halfway through. We want you to finish up strong, so we're gonna be taking a little bit of a break, but also we've got some really exciting things coming up for the show. It's a really exciting time. If you've ever played here's how I attribute it to, or I refer to it as, if you ever played Pokemon, you know that the evolution of a Pokemon is a moment out of time. Everything in the game stops. You focus in on that Pokemon. It's like dun 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 dun, boom boom, and like you take a moment and you realize that Pokemon is about to level up to evolve into its next true form, and that's what we're about to do. We're about to evolve into our next level of Oblivion Bar Pod form, and this is our moment. This is our notification to our trainers, which is you, the audience, saying the OBP is evolving, and we needed to take a step back for a couple months, let Chris finish up, and come back harder, faster, stronger.
Are you doing Daft Punk right now?
Yeah, man.
Harder, better, faster, stronger.
Thank you.
Yep.
I was hoping you'd come in with something. But yeah, that's what it's about to happen. I'm gonna let Chris give a little bit of his side of it, but that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You've surmised it quite well, I'll say. And it is one of those things where this show is such a labor of love. I absolutely adore this podcast. I love sitting down each week with my best friend Aaron to talk about comics, movies, television, video games, what have you, speaking to creators like Brian. It's my favorite creative outlet that I've ever had. But I felt guilty here and there over the last couple months going through this, that I just have not been able to give myself completely to the show based on the fact that I'm going through chemotherapy. I should warn everybody as well that like things are going well. The last chemo session that I had, which was my fourth one, whatever was growing in the beginning of the year has gone. It's officially gone. We're just going to keep going. So that's good news. It is technically stage 4, but That's not as scary as it sounds, according to my oncologist. So I'll obviously keep everybody updated, but that's kind of what's going on. But we wanted to go out with a bang. And this conversation with Brian K. Vaughan is a perfect example of that. And then when we come back in the fall, like Aaron said, it is going to be a brand new show in a lot of ways. You'll still get the same Chris and Aaron. You'll still get the same creator interviews. You'll get the same movie reviews, Midnight Rewind, most anticipated films of the next year, Last Call Awards, Halloween special, all those things will still happen. It's just that we're, as Aaron said, we're going from Charmander to Charmeleon, and then maybe one day we'll just go full Charizard. Who knows?
Charizard.
Oblivion Bar Podian. I don't know what's the next name for us. We got to come up with that. But
Opamine.
But enough of that, enough preamble. We're not even going to plug Patreon because through all this process, Aaron and I we still need to discuss it, but we're probably just going to pause the Patreon for a bit so that way we can literally just focus on getting through chemo and all that. But we'll let everyone know what's going on there. But outside of that, I think we've said all we can say in terms of going into this conference. It's a very important conversation to me. Again, this is probably my favorite interview that we ever had on here on the show. Not because Aaron is not there. Like I said, I wish he was, but the fact that I had, like, if you had come to me months ago or years ago even and say, Chris, you were hosting this podcast about comics, first creator that comes to mind, who would you want to talk to? I would have said Brian K. Vaughan then, and I would have said Brian K. Vaughan now. So I've officially peaked here on the show. I can only go down from here. So once you guys listen to this conversation, just know that it's just going to get worse. It's just going to be far worse when we come back in the fall.
We're going to get stupid with this.
We're get real stupid.
We're going to just get stupid, yo.
Stupid. STOOPID.
Yeah.
Stupid.
We're going to be upgrade with a Y.
Fat with a PH, but
yeah, exactly.
All right, everybody. Well, that's enough preamble from Aaron and I. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. If this is your first time listening to Oblivion Bar, welcome. These interviews, there's a back catalog of interviews outside of Brian here. We're hoping that, having Brian on here will bring a bunch of new listeners, but new or old, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. We love doing the Oblivion Bar, and we're so excited to bring this conversation with you.
And stay tuned to the socials. I mean, I feel like we're talking about the end of the show. Let's save this for the end of the show.
We'll talk about it later. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this conversation with Brian K. Vaughan.
And now, this week's special guest.
Joining us this week on the show is the 14-time Eisner Award-winning writer of titles like Why the Last Man, Ex Machina, Runaways, The Private Eye, Pride of Baghdad, Paper Girls, Spectators over on Substack, and Saga. It is my pleasure to welcome Brian K. Vaughan onto the Oblivion Bar podcast.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
Of course. To quote Val from Spectators, I have to say it is awesome / fucking insane to have you here on the Oblivion Bar podcast today.
Well, awesome / fucking insane to be here. Thanks again.
Now, I have to start the conversation by bringing up a core memory of mine. And you won't remember this at all, but our very first time meeting was actually at New York Comic Con in 2021. And this moment is particularly very embarrassing for me because I was the last person in line to meet you. And this was the New York Comic Con that you announced with issue 55 that Saga was coming back. And as I got up to the front of the line, again, I was the last person. We had this nice little chat about the return of Saga. And I inherently thought, gosh, I should probably get a photo with Brian because who knows when I'm going to see him at another con. And I asked you for a selfie, which you graciously immediately said yes. We snapped the photo and I think, wow, I have officially successfully immortalized a core memory. Later that day, as I'm scrolling through Instagram, I see this post from you on Instagram from about 3 hours earlier. And it says, "Hi friends, I'm excited and terrified to leave my quarantine cave and see some of you brave souls at the upcoming New York Comic Con. I'll be signing all 4 days of the show. I never charge for my autograph, but in order to say hello to as many of you fine folks as possible, let's limit it to 5 items per visit. Also, because of COVID protocols, I unfortunately won't be able to take my usual awkward selfies, but feel free to Photoshop yourself in and you have a photo of you kind of like with your arm out for people to Photoshop." So point being, this is my long-winded way of apologizing to you for suckering you into that selfie at New York Comic Con.
Wow, do you not need to apologize? How obnoxious. I sound, 2021 was a long time ago. And I'm sorry. I think I know I was doing some TV stuff and everyone was so afraid that, God, if we get any of the cast sick at this convention, they will never come back to another con. So it was a little over the top, but I'm glad that's in the distant past. I was just at Furiosa last night and someone was just wetly coughing onto my neck behind me. And I was like, we are back. I'm so
You
happy.
like feel the spritz behind you. You're like,
Exactly.
okay, we're back. We are so back. And you were being safe. I had this like wave of just dread as soon as I saw that post, because you didn't even hesitate. You were like, absolutely, let's take it. And I actually included the photo in our transcript if you're curious. But it was just a funny, quick moment where I was going through sort of just doom scrolling at the end of a long con, and I see that you were like, no photos. I'm like, oh no, I literally just did that an hour ago.
No photos. Oh God, I'm the worst. Should be publicly executed for that.
I wanted to get that shameless moment out of the way really quick, because we need to get into what I think a lot of folks are here to listen to, which is our conversation about Saga, which is coming back with issue 67, which is hitting shelves on July 31st. And I feel like I should provide a general spoiler warning for folks who are not caught up to issue 66, because truthfully, I don't know if I would be able to forgive myself if I had you here on the show and didn't peel back at least a couple layers of Saga. So you once said, other than my own family, collaborating with Fiona Staples on Saga is the most important thing in my life. Throughout the now 12-year epic that you two have been on with Saga, outside of her obvious one-of-a-kind artwork, what's something that Fiona has consistently brought to your guys' partnership that still amazes you?
I mean, obviously, she's such an extraordinary artist, but she's also a better writer than I am. I just think she is, and a lot of writing is nonverbal. It's not about dialogue. It's about telling a story visually. And just watching what she does with my script, it would not be right to say that she elevates the script as much as totally transforms it. And I was just looking at some new pages coming in for a scene. And when I wrote it, it was just so totally absurd. As it's the Saga universe. You just have characters with weird things for heads doing something, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's pretty nutty. And just watching these pages come in, and it just looks so real. It is so lived in, and these little details that she puts in to the world, into the characters to make them feel real. And then I feel this obligation to I didn't understand who this character was till I saw the way that Fiona drew them when they're just in the background. Just what are they doing when I don't have them blabbing? And she's just an extraordinary collaborator, and she doesn't need me at all, but I'm grateful to be hanging in there for as long as I have.
It's so funny to hear you say that, because I feel this often, like sort of kindred spiritness with people when I meet them out in public, where we're like matching each other's weird and we sort of on the same wavelength. And I feel like that's kind of how you and Fiona are. You guys have that same type of like weird about each of you, that whenever you put something into a script, she just takes it to that next level. And I'm sure it's amazing to see right there in front of you whenever it comes over to your email or whatever.
Yeah. But Fiona's not weird at all. She's incredibly sophisticated, and she has I think just an unbelievably high level of taste. And so I just imagine that she gets these scripts from me and just sighs. And I was just like, how am I going to turn this shit into something brilliant? But she does.
Well, you must be doing something right, because she, again, as I said a moment ago in the question, 12 years now on Saga. Does it feel like 12 years since you guys started this long epic?
Yeah, that's about right. It feels it.
Yeah, that's all right.
Long time. It's roughly the age of my kids that they started this journey. Just pitched this to Fiona right after my first child was born, and Fiona was drawing the first issue as my second kid was born. So yeah, this is my entire life as a parent, has also been my life writing Saga. And the cliches are true about parenthood and comics, that the days are long, the years are short. Yeah, that's right.
It's interesting, because I remember hearing you say in another interview that you've been sort of grifting ideas and thoughts and dialogue from your kids and then bringing them into like Hazel's personality. And I find that really interesting. And your kids sound like, true personalities, just based on what I know of Hazel in this story.
Yeah, they're very different. It's never like a one-to-one analogy for any of these characters, but yes, there is a lot of my children, not just in Hazel, but I think in all the characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you've been very vocal about never wanting to continue on with Saga without Fiona there by your side. You two have taken breaks to ensure that the band stays together, which I think I can speak for all readers and fans of Saga, that Good. Like, please, like, take the time, make sure you guys stay on this thing together, keep it going for as long as you need to. I know we're sort of at like a little bit, like almost at the third or fourth part of the story, I guess. You guys had initially planned for like around 100 issues, correct?
Yeah. It'll be about 18 volumes when all's said and done. And we're working on book 12 now, I guess, volume 12, as it were.
And I heard you mention this in your Instagram post that this is the 12th season. Has it always been sort of in your brain that it's like a season, like sort of, I guess, is that like an analogy to like television or anything like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember my image was like, ugh, don't put season in here. Everyone's going to hate this. But yeah, I was like, oh, it is something that we don't think about in comics, where usually it's like a monthly book comes out, just forever. And there's never any break. And I've always thought of each volume, each 6 issues, as its own sort of standalone world. But yeah, as Fiona and I were talking about our return and sort of what the shape of the back half of our series was going to be, was like, oh, these aren't just storylines, they're seasons. And so I don't know if people, I'm sure, despise the terminology, but I think you'll see, especially in this upcoming arc, what I mean by that.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I think my part of the reason why I said all that is to sort of ask and sort of get your thoughts on sort of the response to readers or from readers, from issue 54, which was truly something that I think a lot of us remember vividly. And you kind of had to be there to know what was going on with Saga there at the end of issue 54. Again, go back to my earlier spoiler warning, because even though I think a lot of people that are listening to this right now have already read up to at least issue 54, it still feels weird. It feels weird to talk about that issue, because when I give Saga to someone, I'm just waiting for them to text me and go, holy crap, issue 54, right? So my question for you is, were you anxious at all for the release of issue 54? And were you or Fiona or both of you worried about how fans were going to react to that 54th issue?
I guess I have to preface this by saying I love our readers. They are the best people in the world. They get our characters tattooed on them and they invite us to their weddings. They send us such lovely gifts. They are, oh, look at that shirt you're wearing. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, they are the best. At the same time, I cannot think about them when I'm working on Saga. I have to put readers out of my mind and just concentrate on telling the story that Fiona and I want to tell. I think I would be paralyzed if I worried about, what do readers want? And instead of just, this is the story we have to tell. So thankfully, no, I wasn't too anxious. I do try and just put it out of my mind. And if Fiona is okay, if she enjoyed drawing the issue and she hasn't quit yet, then I'm like, oh, it's a success. But, yeah.
If you're willing to share, I'm just curious, what was the discourse between you and Fiona that week of the release of issue 54? Was there anything that you can share? Or was it significant at all, in terms of like how you guys were reacting to each other? What was the group chat like?
We don't really do after actions like that when I think we were just so relieved to be at this finish line of this halfway mark of we had been doing it for so long and at such a breakneck pace that I think it was just relief. Like we had sort of washed ashore and now it was like, all right, let's take some time here and do something that most fiction is never allowed to do, which is just pause. And, we run the risk that maybe the audience hates it and they're gone forever. But we were like, we've been so blessed and so fortunate with this series. We can kind of afford to keep going, even if it's just our parents are the last people reading this book in a few years. And there wasn't a lot of worry beforehand. I think it was more nervously bringing up to Fiona that this was going to happen. And Fiona has a rule. I guess we talk a lot before each arc and we talk about, what kind of things do you want to draw? What did you hate about last arc? But what Fiona doesn't want is detailed spoilers about, here's who's going to die, because she wants to read that script and experience it as a reader and sort of channel that into the drawings. So, and yet when my wife and I went to Fiona's wedding and we were there in Canada, and I knew I had to write this upcoming arc. So I was testing the waters. I was like, look, before our break, something big is maybe gonna happen, and sort of feeling out and like, if I send her this, what are we gonna do if but sort of getting coded messages from her back, like, I think we know what awful place this is headed to, and I think she knows me well, and I think she knows what kind of story we were gonna tell. So she was like, no, write it, and let's do it. But no second thoughts, no like last minute reprieve, like maybe we shouldn't do this. I think we knew this is ready for part 2 of this journey to begin.
It's funny. I think one of the things I revere most about your work is that you've sort of just put it out there, right? Like there's I don't sense any sort of regret or timidness when it comes to your work. I think Spectators is a good example of that. Obviously, Saga is a great example of that. Ex Machina, Why the Last Man. There's a lot of things in these stories that you think, wow, we are looking directly into the frontal lobe of Brian K. Vaughan as he's writing this. And I've always admired that. As someone who I think I could maybe speak for a lot of folks who are listening to this right now, people who suffer from imposter syndrome, who think, wow, if I put this out there and people hate it, I will never be able to get over this. But I just don't sense any of that from you. And I really love that.
Thank you. Just a deep-rooted narcissism. And just that I'm just a real dick who's like, just take this stuff that is in our brains. And I knew that, look, most people, I'm amazed as many people respond to it as have, but I knew that people might hate issue 54, might be done with it forever, because I know most people like a book that, maintains its status quo. If somebody dies, there's a chance that they can have a heroic return, and they like it to come out. And if the creators are busy, just get some other creators and have it. But like, if that's what you want out of comics, there are at least 2 companies putting out books that do that every month. You can find that. But if you do want something where death is real, and it's not always going to be a sort of upbeat fan servicey thing. And I think that's, most people want those kinds of stories. Just the kind of corporate storytelling that needs us to keep characters alive forever is just so against what stories are for, which is, I've blabbed about this many times, but it does feel like stories are to prepare us for the worst things in our lives that are going to happen, which is, we're going to lose people that we love. We're going to face tragedy. And I understand that a lot of contemporary fiction is not very interested in that. And that's good, because it gives us a narrow lane to fill.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to one day when I'm sitting down with my kids and mom's getting a little older and it's getting that time, and I hand them Saga and I'm like, hey, if you can handle Marco and Prince Robot passing, you buckle up, because you've got some things happening here in the near future that could possibly be a similar emotion.
It is weirdly nice to hear, because I know when the first issue came out and people were very nice, but they were also like, the big mistake is this book is narrated by Hazel, and we get the sense that she's older and that she's going to be okay. So it sort of removes any tension when your protagonist is going to be okay. It's always like, you wait and see.
It's funny because rereading Saga in preparation for this, I went back and read it all the way through.
Wow.
Total drag. I'm telling you, I was slugging through it. Right. And when I got to around issue 54, I started to see the seeds for the first time of you sort of letting the reader know in a very subtle way that like Marco is planting himself within Hazel because, again, what's about to happen. And what I find really interesting is that we get this very fun and welcome heel turn by Prince Robot in the story, where he sort of gloms onto the team and sort of helps out for a bit. And his demise is when I talk to people about Saga who are caught up and are willing to like sort of share their thoughts on it, I always like to bring up Prince Robot. I'm like, man, I want a little more time with him. Right. And I think that what he is about to do there in issue 54 with the will before he eventually is murdered, I'm like, man, that really stinks. That's like Vegeta in the Buu saga in Dragon Ball Z. It's like he was almost there and he flipped it again. He went right back to the dark side because it was what he's known, right?
Yeah, it is what I love. I love that phrase heel turn, because I think it's something that we all do like every day of our lives, that we're constantly heel turning and going against our best instincts. But it's nice to hear how much a character with a TV for a head that people can feel for. And it's a character who's initially started as like, oh, this is a supporting antagonist who's just trying to murder our main characters, the people that we love. This should be a disposable figure that you don't care. And the fact that people are really wrecked, I think, is again a testament to Fiona. And when I think about, someone was asking me recently, how do you write characters that people will care about? And I was like, I have no idea. I don't know how to make people care about actual human beings. It's really hard, but I care about watching Fiona's TV-headed characters. The way they move their hands, the way they move their bodies is just, they feel very real. And you just, even when they're terrible assholes and villainous characters, they just feel so real that you really do come to care about them. So again, that's all Fiona.
Yeah, speaking of Fiona and sort of her visual storytelling, I'm just curious. I don't know if you've ever talked about this before, but with the robots, how, obviously they speak a lot of truth through their face. How much direction do you give Fiona with all that? Is that all her, or do you offer anything?
Well, if there's something that, so the robots have kind of a tick where if they're especially emotional or something, their face will betray their emotions the way that ours do, when we blush, but instead of blushing, they'll flash like a mushroom cloud or something. So I'll say, if there's something on the screen, I'll suggest what it is. But the real acting for me is, most of the time, the robots have nothing on the screen. It is just a blank screen. So you have nothing, you have no facial expression. And those are the best panels. You can go through any panel and look at Prince Robot when he's just blank screened, as I say, you know exactly what he's thinking or what the tone of his voice is. And that's what Fiona's genius is. So I will say Prince Robot is mildly peeved in this panel. I won't say how, because I don't know how. I'm not as good an actor as Fiona. But so yeah, I'll say what they're feeling, but not how to show that. That's her genius gift.
Well, I want to go over one of my favorite lines in the series. This is from issue 64. And again, going back and rereading, I was joking earlier, it was an incredible reread. And this really, for some reason, I've read Saga all the way through, I would say at least yearly since I picked it up in 2018. It's one of those books, Brian, I'm being truthful. I'm not saying this because you're right in front of me. Every couple of years, I got to go through, I got to grab my hardcovers, right? I got to grab that blue, that pink, and that purple, and I got to go through and read it again. And there was this line in issue 64, again, from the infamous Hazel, one of her narrations. She says, no matter how many life-changing figures cross our paths, sooner or later, we all supposedly become our parents. I found that really powerful because as young people, none of us really get to choose what we inherit from our parents. It often can become this cyclical recycling from generation to generation. Most of us aren't even aware of these traits that we have until we're much older. So with Hazel, are there any North Star impulses or traits from Marco and Elena that you keep in mind when formulating her course throughout this story?
Yeah, I think probably the most important word in that line that you quoted from Hazel is supposedly. That Hazel is constantly questioning. And that is the thing that when we meet her parents, it's Marco's a prisoner of war, and we meet the two of them, that I think that's their defining characteristic, is that they're two young soldiers, but they're both very questioning, that they've always spent their life trying to do their best, but questioning, are we doing the right thing? Is this, is everything we've been told a lie? And so I think that's probably the thing that Hazel has most inherited. But I think, unfortunately for her parents, that includes questioning them, and that, are the ways that I was raised. Is this right? And is this book that is so important to them, will it be so important to me? So she is a skeptical, contrarian, questioning, difficult young lady, exactly like her parents.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I think as time goes on, and it makes sense, of course, because up to this point, Elena's a single mother. She's raising two kids by herself on the run. And it feels like Hazel's personality, at least from my view, is slowly trending more towards Elena and some of her impulses. But I feel like there's still that sort of that flint of Marco in her, where she will often put herself in danger to save other people or to do the thing that she needs to do. And her, kindred relationship with her brother, Brobot, right? Like, I feel like a lot of that love, that inherent love, comes from Marco's side in a way.
I think it's, you said you're a parent?
No, I'm not. I am a single man in my 30s, so I'm happily selfish.
It's nothing selfish about it at all. There's the last thing the world needs is more of us in here.
Sure.
But
Sure.
should you ever choose to go that path, I think you'll see it's never so easy as like, oh, this kid's got my eyes and, his mother's nose, something. It is a weird combination that happens where it'll take one attribute from your partner and then something from their father or something. So it is complicated and probably a lot of ways that I deny too, where I'm like, oh, it's not my fault, or I take responsibility for this. I don't know. This is a long, rambling way of hiding from this question because I guess I don't want to reveal where Hazel is headed, but
Sure.
Stay tuned.
We will find out eventually, I think is a good sort of tease for that one. And I think we're all excited to see what happens. Again, It's funny because when I think, I was raised by a single mother. I don't know why for everyone, you weren't here for this, but as soon as Brian hopped on the line here, I just immediately trauma dumped about my sort of journey through cancer. And then now I'm telling him about my single, my upbringing with a single mother. And it's funny because I think a lot of my interesting traits that I have of myself are directly from my mom. Like I hyperfixate on things. I'm extremely clean, which I guess maybe it sort of trends towards that hyperfixation. I'm like all or nothing. I don't do anything half-heartedly. It is either 100% or it is 0%. And I feel like I came out of the womb with that. None of that was like gained throughout my childhood. I don't know. It's interesting. And I always see these when I'm reading Saga and I'm seeing Hazel and sort of her journey. I think very vividly about sort of of Hazel's sort of what's a tactful way to say this? She's got a potty mouth, I guess is a good way to say this. Like she's very, and she does it outrightly to Elena a lot of times. Right. And I think if you go back and read Saga from the very beginning, that is sort of Elena's calling card, is that she's sort of abrasive in a way. I don't know if that's the correct way to say it, but she's not afraid to tell you what she thinks. Right.
Yeah, no, that is definitely true for both characters. And, but I also find that that's, I hear a lot about how filthy Saga is, and there's definitely a lot of wall-to-wall swearing. I just think, isn't that everyone's life? Aren't we all doing this? It's like most of our fiction is kind of neutered from this to be family friendly. But yeah, my kids swear a lot. And I guess maybe it's now talking about our parents. I know for me, my parents were always like, they don't care if you smoke or drink or do any of this, just please no foul language, Brian. And so I had no interest in smoking or drinking, and I fucking love to swear. So there is an element to that. But yes, I think what you're saying, that sense of you came out fully cooked as yours, definitely having two kids shows the truth of that, I think, because now you have a second one and you're like, I'm raising this one exactly the same as the other one. I am the same person. They're in the same surroundings and they are so wildly different. And from Jump Street, that it does feel that, yes, kids come out pretty well cooked.
I just spoke about it a moment ago. Whenever I recommend Saga to people, which is often, I will tell them the deluxe hardcovers are the way to go for me, right? I think that's the ideal way to, obviously single issues, month to month is the ideal, I'd say like probably the best way. But if you're going to collect this in like sort of an all-in-one form, I love the deluxe hardcovers. They are just, the back matter is chef's kiss, right? And one of my favorite blurbs from that first hardcover is when talking about your process of writing a script, you begin by locking yourself inside a Wi-Fi-less flophouse and begin mapping out everything on these 22-line staple notebooks, which the lines, they sort of parallel the pages in a comic, right? And the line that you have in the hardcover there that always tickled me is, incidentally, most monthly comic books only have 20 pages per issue, but I don't know how to write like that, at least not until Staples manufactures smaller notebooks, which is, I always get like a true giggle out of that. So my question for you is that still true? Or has your process evolved since writing that in that first hardcover?
It's definitely still true for Saga. Same Wi-Fi-less room, same Staples notebooks. I should make it clear when I say Staples notebooks, not Fiona Staples, but the giant conglomerate Staples. But yeah, they have these nice little steno notepads, and they're 22 lines. And that is just the pace of Saga. It always has been. That sort of rigid haiku of roughly 5 scenes with roughly 5 panels to page. Yeah, that really works for Saga. But I knew by the time I was starting Spectators, this graphic novel I'm doing with Nico Henrischen, I really wanted to try something very different and to have the luxury, just really to soak in a scene for a long time. And, Spectators has one scene that I think is almost 100 pages long, and it's been thrilling. So I still tell Saga the way we started, and that's, I think it, with slight variations, that'll be the pace and the tone of it till the end. But it's not how I want to tell all of my stories for the rest of my life. So it's been good to force myself to branch out a little bit.
Sure. I think it should be important to annotate that Staples not an official sponsor of this episode. Brian will use Office Depot if they create 22-line notebooks, just as long as it's the 22 lines, right?
Please, yeah.
What's funny is that, again, going through those deluxe hardcovers, in the first hardcover, it is a lot of scripts. You interview Fiona at one point, I think, which is really interesting. You do a lot of stuff for that first issue. There's a lot of interesting back matter. For the second hardcover, though, I thought was really cool is that, and you have this sort of hard, fine rule about Fiona does the covers, right? Fiona does the only cover. There's no variants. And if there are, it's usually like a slight difference for a second printing or something, right? And what I found really cool is that in the second hardcover, you reached out to a bunch of comic pros that are some of the best in the industry to do sort of a rendition on Saga, which I really love. There's Todd McFarlane, Jim Bartel, your collaborator, Cliff Chang, plenty of people who create these incredible Saga. Some are cover, some are double page. Like it's a really cool collection.
Thank you. Yeah. It's, our first issue had like a retailer variant that had a few, and Paul Pope jumped in and did a great one early on. But I think Fiona and I just, as we saw everyone, like the market flooding with variant covers, it did feel like, oh, this is going to be a short-term gain that is not for the long-term health of the book, which is like these covers really matter. And these covers are not just a marketing tool, but it's always been for us the first panel of this story that you're going to read. So it really did matter to us. And we're probably leaving some money on the table by not doing 35 variants each issue. But Fiona, I think, very generously was like, but still, it would be fun to see Marcos Martin handle these characters, or Pia Guerra jump in, or any of our friends. So it was cool. I think we might do that again in a future hardcover with some other artists. But when it comes to the canonical series, I don't want to see anyone but Fiona on those covers.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, as much as I've been suckered into a variant here and there, and I think the official stance of the Oblivion Bar podcast is that variants are a bad deal overall, because a lot of times they will entice you with creators that you love to buy these 1 in 25, 1 in 50 variants. And I keep buttering you up here, but I'll say it again. I just really revere both you and Fiona for making that decision to have a hard stance. Like, Saga has what is it, 6 or 7 printings for the first issue?
I'm not sure what we're up to at this point, but
I don't even know. I want to say there's got to be less than 10, but more than 7 at least, right? And you could have very easily told Image or anyone and been like, hey, let's get Todd McFarlane to do a 1 in 100 9th printing, and they would sell like gangbusters. But you guys have stuck to the fact that this is you and Fiona's deal, right? And you guys will be the kind of the sole creators on this. And again, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the stoppage, right? And that's kind of where we're at currently, right? You guys have had a little bit of a break between issue 66 and issue 67. I'll speak for readers here again that it's exciting that we're getting 67 there on July 31st, which I think is the week of San Diego Comic-Con, if I'm not mistaken.
I forget when Comic-Con is this year. I'm sorry I'm not going to be there, but I'm too busy writing more Saga. But yes, it's coming. The first issue's complete. I was just proofing it, and it's a good one. But thanks. It's nice of you to say. I wish I could say that all of these decisions, taking a break or not doing variant covers, were just out of my artistic integrity. But a lot of it's just being a mercenary as a businessman. And I remember going to the comic shop once, when sort of the variant boom was starting, and there was a series I was really loving. I was like, oh, a new issue is out. Fantastic. And I picked it up and brought it home. I was like, oh, it's not a new issue. It's just a different cover on this issue. And it really hurt my relationship with that book. And it's like, you do get sort of a short-term bump of this. And, I have nothing against collectors. I'm a nerdy, obsessive collector of comic art. And I also think, look, if there are books out there, whatever it takes to stay alive. And if these covers are helping you stay alive, that's great. But it felt like for Saga, we're asking people, it's a big investment to join us for over 100 issues of something. So let's not make you buy 3 of the same thing, let's just give you everything you need in one package. And if you want to get a hardcover and a soft cover and a digest size thing, you can, but you don't need to.
So what I find really interesting, again, is, this extensive flushed out series. You are known for this. You're known for the flushed out series that spans over years, that seemingly it's kind of become your calling card in a sense. Why the Last Man was 60 issues. Ex Machina was 50 issues. Paper Girls was 30. Of course, Saga is now at 67 and going strong. However, it's not really a secret that the industry is sort of changing, right? It's like limited series and maxi series are becoming sort of the new norm, even for creator-owned series, right? So you've always struck me as someone who has their finger on the pulse of the medium. But I'm curious. So what are your thoughts on this? Why do you think the industry is sort of going this way?
Yeah, well, first of all, the industry is a mystery to me now, because it's grown so far beyond what I can read. Is like, so when you say this is the norm, like according to whom? Like my kids are reading so many comics on webtoons, or it is a very strange global market with a lot of shapes. But I will agree with you. Yes, the creator-owned ongoing is rare. And I think that just because it's really fucking hard, it is, and again, not as hard as having almost any other job or actual job out there, but in the fake job having world of comics, it is really tough, because when you do a creator-owned ongoing book, it has to be the mothership, the core of your life. It's going to be your primary job. And I think most people are like, I would rather have like my Marvel or DC book, a steady, dependable gig. And then when I step out to do some creator-owned thing, let me test the waters with, 6 issues of something or do something short. But I was always influenced by Todd McFarlane saying that, look, you have to bring readers with you. And if you're like, oh, I'm going to do some Spider-Man, a little Spawn on the side, they're not going to read Spawn. They're just going to read Spider-Man. He's like, you have to narrow down that sort of access to you that, they can only get you through this thing. So yeah, doing a creator-owned ongoing book is saying, I'm going to not do anything else other than this for a while. And not only that, but I'm going to find partners who are going to come along. And instead of taking the sure payday of working on an existing character, I'm going to do this with you. And I'm going to do it potentially for years. It's like, it's an insane thing. I can't believe it exists at all. But it is, in success, Invincible, The Boys. Those are 2 series that I know those guys, neither of them at any stage that they were working on that were like, this is going to be a hit television show someday. They were just like, put one foot in front of the other and tell this vast story. And I think they found that most young people, this is what they want. That I think my kids aren't super interested in movies because they've gotten to watch every season of The Office and every episode of The Office. And if you do that, like over the course of 2 weeks, The Office, which is for me like a fun, nice sitcom, is like their War and Peace. They get to watch characters age and change and grow. And it's like, this is an unbeatable experience. So I think, yeah, people are like, oh, Saga, I can buy this compendium. This is awesome. And they finish, I'm like, give me the next one. I'm like, that's the only problem with ongoing is like, they want it all now. It's going to take us years to make another one of those. But yeah, I don't know. This is another long-winded, rambling way of saying it's tough and it will be rare because it's tough, but it's the best thing in the world when it works. And so I hope more people will be brave enough to try it after you've found some success, maybe at Marvel and DC, or maybe if you haven't, and just like, I want to take a big swing, but go out there and know that plan like we did for Saga. I told Fiona, I was like, look, this is going to get canceled. No one wants this. No one wants a book that doesn't have superheroes, that has full frontal robot nudity. This isn't for anybody. So just know, probably around issue number 6, it's going to get canceled. But we're going to have forever on our shelf this volume 1 of 1 that will always be like, remember when we did that batshit crazy comic and how crazy it would be if there were an alternate, a parallel Earth where we were still writing it? Now we are in that parallel Earth and we're still making it. So it feels good.
Yeah, let's go ahead and cue up the camera to Fiona's art studio where she's currently shackled to her Jack Kirby artboard working on future issues of Saga. Because she is, like you said, you've gotten her to Saga, right? She's done covers and she's done like, some of the Archie stuff. But I think as long as I've known Fiona's career, it seems like she's been so intrinsically tied to Saga.
Yeah, and I'm sure she's aching to break free of that. And it's like, it's such a drag to be an artist, whereas, I can write much slower than I used to be, but I can do something else. I can write 250 pages with spectators as I'm writing Saga. It's much harder for Fiona to, but not impossible. And I think she works really hard. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see things other than Saga from her in the future. But this week, at least, she sure is working hard on Saga, and I'm the beneficiary of that. These pages are absurd.
Well, I'm curious, while we're kind of on the topic, what have you learned from, I've heard you talk about how you love endings, like the ending part of these stories is something that you often look forward to. And obviously you've worked on a lot of long running stories that, in my opinion, have nailed the ending. So I'm curious, what have you learned about writing an ending, specifically with, again, these long form narratives?
Oh, thank you, first of all, because I know it is not always the case. The challenge of endings is knowing that a lot of people are going to be deeply upset by this, that endings are hard. And it's like to land in a way that will please everyone is impossible. But you just have to stay true to the story. And I guess that's the thing that I've most learned, is that endings really matter. That there have been plenty of times over the years where I'm like, oh boy, I have more to say about Y the Last Man. Or The Private Eye is a book I think about all the time. With Mari's like, oh, I could so easily step back into that world, but I don't want to, because I'm not writing or exploring worlds. That's just an imaginary thing. I like people, and I like following their stories, and it really matters what the last issue of Ex Machina is. You might hate it, but it matters that that's the end, and that we're not coming back to tell more, and there's not going to be a mini series that'll wrap up or explore some unfinished things. That I like stories having beginning, middle, and end. And again, we live in a sort of world where that's scary, because it's like, well, why end something? Why close that door? It's so hard to make something that people respond to. Leave it open till we can go back to this. I don't want to. It's time to go and tell another story. So that's what I've learned, is that it really counts and there's no going back. So try not to fuck it up.
If there's one thing that you're going to get from a Brian K. Vaughan story, it's finality, or, I would say conviction is maybe another word. Like you said it here, and I agree with you 100%. As someone who's been following your career for quite a long time, it seems like something happens in a story, there's usually no like, oops, just kidding. The only thing I can think of, actually, there's only one time in my reading of your work that's happened was Lion Cat. and I think it was like issue 6 or 7. She is flung out of a ship. And there's a rumor, and I'm curious. I'm going to ask you, this wasn't a question I had, but I'm curious while I have you right in front of me. There was a rumor that when you presented this to Fiona, she had threatened to quit the book if you killed Lion Cat. Is that correct? Or is that like a hearsay? She
didn't quit, but she did say, oh, that's cute, an ending that you have her, but I'm going to draw in the next issue when we see Lion Cat get blown out of an airlock. Her little collar activates and a space helmet is going to come over, and then she's just going to paddle back to the ship and be fine. She's like, that was just one point where she's like, nope, not following you down this path. And I had to let her know, don't worry, that Lion Cat, unlike many of our characters, does have 9 lives, and she's been through a lot. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That probably means she'll be A-okay until the end of the series, right? And so will Goose, Brian, so will everyone you love.
Brian, don't say that. Well, I have one final question for you before I let you go. And it ties back to folks like you and I who adore picking the brains of creatives. There's this book that you put out, or you didn't put out, but you contributed to, from 2004, called Writers on Comic Script Writing. And you are on the cover of volume 2. And at one point you were asked in this book about your 1 millionth word, and you sort of make fun of yourself for Y the Last Man and it not being as an original idea as you had originally thought of when you came up with it. And you said something here that I wanted to highlight. You say, there are no new ideas, just new extensions of old ideas. So my final question for you, Brian, is 20 years later, with all the acclaim that you've garnered, with the passage of time behind you since saying that, Is there any part of that statement that still rings true?
Yeah, I think that's still legit. I mean, I worry that I think a lot of people will say, oh, there are no new ideas. So I think they use that as an excuse to retreat back into, so I might as well write my Sherlock Holmes story if there's something, if there's nothing new. And I don't think that's the case. I think Saga, is a book that's credited a lot for how imaginative and out there and weird, but at the end of the day, it's Romeo and Juliet. It's what if you took two people from two worlds that hate each other and you just shifted, instead of them offing themselves at the end, what if that is just the beginning? So I recognize that is not particularly novel or interesting. I think what makes it different is Fiona and I, that we are trying to pour this, as much of ourselves into this work. And I think it really benefited from the very beginning, telling Fiona, like, I don't want to do a story about parenthood, that I don't want to do a story that's just for people who have kids. I want to do something for people that's just about how fucking hard it is to bring something new into the world, whatever that is. It's a song or a pie or a child. It's tough. The world doesn't want new things. And so, yeah, I think that young, slightly less bald guy was on the right path 20 years ago. That don't be afraid that, you do characters with TV heads, and then you find out how many TV-headed characters there have been over the last 50 years, and you realize, oh, okay, it's all right. Everything's been done, but they haven't done this story that I'm doing with this TV-headed character, because so much of it is based on my friends and my life and my collaborators. So, yes, don't be afraid that what you're doing is not new. It will be, because it's you.
I love that. And we've spent this entire conversation talking about Saga, and the very first line in Saga is, this is how an idea becomes real. And I just found that very full circle, that going back to this book where you're very much in Why the Last Man, towards, the beginning-ish stages of your career. And then we flash forward to Saga, which, I mean, I would dare to say that that's maybe your most successful title thus far. And it just feels very full circle. And I love that so much. So I wanted to bring that up and sort of pick your brain on that.
Yeah, no, that line is both that opening line, Hazel's narration, and her mother's response of, am I shitting? That's what Saga is about, and that's what my career is about, and that's what my life has been about, that I am not a novelist. I don't know how to do this alone, that I need somebody else, and to have this sort of kernel of an idea for Saga, it just felt like impossible. This is something that can't be done without a partner, and you need a partner there to sort of, when you have this moment, it feels like we're giving birth to something, someone to let you know, is this shit, or did we just help give birth to something new? And it has been as thrilling as getting that first page from Fiona, knowing like, oh, this might work. We might have done this. This is how an idea becomes real. It's very cool. Thank you for still remembering that line all these years later. I'm glad it worked. That was the intent.
And what's funny is that on a much smaller scale, Aaron and I, when we created the Oblivion Bar, we did it as sort of a vehicle to talk about things that we loved: movies, comics, television, video games, talking to folks who create the things that we love, all those sort of aspects sort of combined with our two personalities. We always say that the Oblivion Bar has my looks and his personality. And I think that if I was to try to do this show alone, obviously I'm talking to you alone, but most of the episodes of the Oblivion Bar, including interviews, are with him and I together. And I think if I tried to do this alone, it just would not work. It would not be at all the same. And it is truly the collaborative venture is one of the most fulfilling. And I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I think it's worth reiterating and worth celebrating in that sense. And that's why we love comics, right? Like, it is the most collaborative medium, I don't know if it's the most, but it's the one that I love the most, I guess.
It can be. It's interesting. It's also the one medium where you don't need, like, Daniel Klaus can do it all and do it better than I can. There are, and yet there is something magical that can happen with this collaboration between a tight band of people that's as cool as the best solo act out there. So I'm grateful for this medium every day.
Brian, it was an absolute pleasure having you here on the Oblivion Bar podcast. I'm going to sort of let the facade float away for just a quick moment and say what a treat it has been being your fan for all these years. Just been such a huge fan of your work. Why the Last Man, Ex Machina, Pride of Baghdad, Paper Girls. But specifically, and I'm sure this has come across in our conversation today, Saga has meant so much to me. So anytime someone comes to me and says, I want to get into comics, where do I start? What's your recommendation? I don't hand them Batman or Spider-Man. I give them Saga because I'm excited to get that text down the road where they're like, holy crap, this is something very special. So it means a lot to me to be able to tell you that. It means a lot to have you here on the show. And I just so hope that at some point down the road, maybe at the end of Saga, we can get together again and talk about it.
It is 100%. It is a deal. And I so enjoy the podcast. So just before this, I was listening to a couple of previous episodes. It's like, oh, this Tom King interview. This is the best Tom King interview I've ever heard. How you guys really do your homework. And thank you for just treating this nonsense so seriously. And also just congrats on your fight that you are waging right now. Is very brave and overwhelming and terrifying for me to think. And the fact that you're able to talk about comics as you're doing all this, you're something else. So keep it up.
Thank you very much. This is what keeps me going. The Oblivion Bar is the greatest creative outlet I've ever experienced. So moments like this, it makes it easy in a sense. But before I let you go, I'm going to pass the baton off to you one more time. Is there anything that you want to plug or highlight before we let you go?
Well, let's see. So Saga returns in end of July. So please head to your local comic book shop to pick that up. And then Spectators, I mentioned, is this massive 300 plus page graphic novel, or will be when it's done, that I'm doing with Nico Henrischen, who I did Pride of Baghdad with. And we do it through Substack. Our weird Substack address is just called Exploding Giraffe. So if you Google Exploding Giraffe, a reference to Pride of Baghdad, it will take you here. You can read it 100% for free. And we hope to have some news in the not too distant future about it maybe finally coming to print. For those of you who hate digital comics and just want to hold something in your hand, we're here for you. It's coming. Stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much. And again, hopefully we'll talk to you here on the Oblivion Bar down the line.
It's a date. Thanks again, Chris.
Alrighty, there's that conversation with Brian K. Vaughan. Once again, thank you so much, Brian, for coming on to the show. Absolutely adore that interview. Adore that man, I will say. That bald man is one of my favorite bald men ever. I hope he's okay with that. He does talk about it in the conversation, so
he does. I think he's a pretty well-humored individual. Yeah. He seems like he's like a very down-to-earth guy.
Yes.
Like amazing, like literally a legend, but just down to earth. And like, so again, I gotta say this. You nailed this interview, man. You nailed this interview, and you even gave me a shout out at the end. Uh-huh. You broke my little heart. I felt so special. I really loved the entire interview. From talking to, again, you dropped the F-bomb in the beginning, which kind of like,
I gotta set the tone.
And then he's like, my kids cuss. Fuck it, you know. Yeah. Like I was like, hell yeah, this guy's awesome. One of my favorite parts, absolutely though, was just the fact that not only the story of you talking about when you first met him. And the selfie story. Yeah. I'm just going to call it the selfie story. That was awesome.
Infamous.
But yeah, he just genuinely, I don't know, you guys just like genuinely kind of like were two dudes talking.
We're gelling.
Yeah, you're just gelling. Yeah. You know, you can feel it in your jellies. And
I was feeling it in my jellies.
You felt it in your jellies. And it's such a good conversation because it was just like, again, like you talk about all the time, you know, you and I talk about this all the time, that rat-a-tat, that rhythm, you know, that feeding off of each other. And you just, god damn, dude, your interview skills in this one were just peak. And the fact that Brian K. Vaughan said that we had one of the best interviews with Tom King ever that he's ever heard.
Just put that on a vocal track and then broadcast it on my grave when I'm dead. Yeah. That's all I want.
Yeah. It was like, holy shit. Like this man, and he's like talking about how he listened to several episodes beforehand. Holy shit. Like that's fucking insane. Like, you know, he tells us that we do a good job here at the bar. And man, talk about setting a new bar. Huh?
Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think what I love about this is that I often have to sort of force myself to not hype these folks up so much because I adore almost every career that we have here on the show. I am a giant fan of, right? And I have to tell myself internally, dude, chill out. These are just people. They're just really creative nerds. Just talk to them like a person, right? Mm-hmm. And when I had Brian on here, not for one moment, and I told you this after, like, I think I texted you right after the conversation. I was like, not for one moment did I feel nervous in this conversation.
You didn't seem it at all.
Yeah. I mean, and the video will be up on YouTube. If you are more of a visual creature, this interview will be up on YouTube the moment that this is out. So you can go watch that and you can tell, like you said, and I appreciate you saying that. It's pretty obvious that he and I are just we're having a great conversation. And I can't remember if I mentioned it in the conversation or not, but we had a similar moment at San Diego 2022, where he and I just happened to be next to each other at a bar at the Hilton next to the San Diego Comic-Con Convention Center. And we just clicked, which is why I wanted to really have him on the show. And they always say, don't meet your heroes. Brian is he proves that notion wrong.
I know you've mentioned that before on the show, but during the interview, I don't believe it was mentioned. But I mean, either way, like you could just tell, like there's a rapport there, and it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Brian. Thank you everybody who listened to that conversation, who came over to listen to this conversation with Brian. It's funny because we put out one of my favorite interviews the moment we're about to be off for a couple months. So I'm going to come back all rusty. Like I said earlier, it's just going to get worse from here. So
you won't. And we're going to be doing things like that's the thing. Like, I feel like the thing that we need to tell people, especially like our Patreon members, like, yes, we're going to pause the Patreon. So we're not taking your money while we're gone.
Right.
But this is the time for us to step back, reflect on what we've done over the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Really
we've done this for 4 years, Aaron.
4 years, man. Just take a step back. Again, this isn't like people are like, oh, are they coming back? Absolutely.
Yeah. There's no question we're coming back. This is not foreshadowing for anything.
No. Stay tuned on the socials. You're gonna see some shit. Right?
See some shit.
Hold on to your butts.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna don't look at the T-Rex in the eyes because their vision is based on movement.
Yep.
Don't
run to the porta potty.
Don't run to the porta potties. Hey, when you gotta go, you gotta go. Just be prepared. Be prepared.
Yeah.
Anyways, the point is that we're gonna be here. You're gonna see us on social media. Maybe not on the Oblivion Bar. It's gonna be kind of a little bit of a pause, but you're gonna see some hints to when we're coming back exactly. Some new things popping up. But stay tuned to. I know we're still gonna be active on our own social media, so feel free to reach out to us there as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's at chacker41 on Twitter and Instagram.
Yep. Yeah. Everything.
Yep. And for me, it's at Better Actions on Twitter, at Better Actions TTV on Instagram. But yeah, what else we got, Chris?
No, you got it. I mean, I think that's pretty much surmises it all. We love this show so much. We are taking a little bit of a break. It's funny because Brian sort of talks about how he and Fiona purposely take these sort of extended breaks to keep the band together. Right?
Didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Keep things because you got to it's like a relationship, So I probably shouldn't say that.
Got to keep things spicy.
You do got to keep things spicy. But yeah, like a working relationship. If you work very close proximity to somebody with hard deadlines and you thought I was gonna say something else. Hard deadlines and just a constant churning of day-to-day grind, you're gonna get tired of the other person. You're gonna get tired of your team. But I think,
are you saying that you're tired of me right now? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, not at all. But I do feel like you may not feel it. Maybe you don't feel it. Maybe it's like something that like is kind of like
it's subconscious.
It's subconscious,
Sure.
but like I don't feel like that. But at the same time, I totally understand. We have things to do. You're gonna finish up chemo. You're gonna come back strong. I'm starting a new job, hopefully soon. So it's gonna give me some time to kind of like get into that and figure out what my schedule's gonna be like.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good time for us to focus on what we have to focus on individually, and then we can step forward and again like break out of this cocoon.
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna go from Caterpie to Butterfree.
I think let's Kakuna in there first. We gotta be Kakuna, right?
I know, but I'm saying you're like this break will be the Kakuna.
Oh, sure. Okay, gotcha. What's Butterfree sound in the anime?
No, Butterfree is like.
Oh no, that's Togepi.
No, that's Togepi.
Damn it.
Butterfree's like.
Oh yeah, he just screams. My favorite is Starmie.
What is it? Krabby.
All right, we can just sit here and just do anime Pokemon sounds forever. But the overarching last thing we'll say is that we love the Oblivion Bar. We can't wait to come back in the fall. We're gonna come back better than ever. Like Aaron said, we're turning the knobs from behind the scenes. Some things are gonna be happening. You guys will see those very soon. And I would just say, as sort of if you made it this far into the conversation, we'll just say that think the week of New York Comic Con, Aaron. Well, maybe something happening there.
Probably.
We'll see. I don't know, but yes,
more than likely. So.
All right, everybody.
More than likely.
Thank you so much again. Thank you so much again.
Did you redo?
I'm trying to close out the show, Aaron. I'm trying to get out of here.
Sorry. Try not to leave.
I know. He's just trying to keep it going.
Are we gonna closing time?
Yeah.
No. We're not closing. goddammit.
Semisonic. Yeah. It's not closing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the place is closed and they reopen, but yeah, we'll be back, everybody. I think we said it about a billion times. We will be back. So that'll do it for episode 165. When we come back with episode 166, you'll see why hopefully we haven't overhyped this, Aaron. That's something I'm really nervous about now, is that we've hyped it up too much. What do you think?
You can't. No.
It's good.
No,
It's good.
nah.
We've seen it. We know it's happening.
Yeah.
We know that's cool. So, all right, everybody, that'll do it for episode 165. Aaron, take us out of here.
All right. Subscribe to our podcast. This feels weird.
You can still subscribe. Please do.
Yeah, subscribe to our podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. That's where we'll be. Go to YouTube.
Yep.
Subscribe to our channel. Go to Apple Podcasts. Go to Spotify. Click those subscription buttons to be aware of when we're back. Okay. So thank you to our patrons, and again, thank you so much to our patrons. We will come back with plenty for you. If you guys keep an eye on the socials, like they're posting these care packages that we sent out recently, which were labors of love, mostly on Chris's part. I was there for moral and ethical and emotional support for that, through the whole racial support. But we love, we want to say thank you again as we take a step back to our patrons. We appreciate you being there, and you will see more soon. Okay, Alex, Aaron, Alice, Botter from Shortbox, Brad B, Cassidy, Chris in the Bada Boom Pod, Chris Y, Christy, Danny, David, Elliot, George, Greg from First Issue Club, Haley, Ham 6, Jake from Spectales, Jake S, Jeremy, Kenny, Kyle, Losi, Mac, Miles, Mike, Olivia, Robert, Sean from I Used to Like This One, Travis, Zach, and Brad and Lise from Couples Counseling. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being patrons. If you want to support the show without spending any money, a 5-star rating and or review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify helps the show a ton. You have no idea how much your rating will help us. So it's
Get us in the algorithm.
Most free thing you can do is just give us a rating. Follow us on social media: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Threads at Oblivion Bar Pod. And like I said, for Chris, it's at CHacker41. For myself, it's at Better Actions. For Twitter, at Better Actions TTV. For Instagram, because some asshole on Instagram will not give up, at Better Actions.
It's me. I have it. I'm just holding it over your head.
Not even fucking posting anything. What an asshole. Official merch of the show. I'm sorry, he's not an ass. I don't even know.
I'm sure he's a nice
Official
guy.
merch of the show. He's a fucking saint.
He's a jerk.
Official merch of the show can be found at our website, oblivionbarpodcast.com. Thank you, Kevin Siegler, for all of our Oblivion Bar art. He's at the Zigs on Instagram. Thank you, Dream Kid, for all of our musical themes. Thank you, DJ Skyvark, for our grid theme. Also, I want to special shout out to Elliot. What's his handle for our art as well?
I don't know, Elliot. I'm so sorry. He's obviously a good friend of the show, patron, but Elliot Dixon is his full name on social media. So if you look him up there, you'll be able to find it.
Great artist. Appreciate all of his work that he's done for us.
Did both of our New York Comic Con and C2E2 posters. We'll have another one of those, I'm sure, maybe for New York this year.
Absolutely. Last but not least, and this means a lot to us, don't forget to tip your bartenders 20% or more. We said it from the beginning. Don't be a dick.
While we're away, everyone, we won't be able to tell you every week to tip your bartenders and servers 20%. So don't be a dick.
But
just
we'll be
do
checking.
It. But we're like Santa.
We'll be watching. I'm watching you. I'm watching you. I'm watching. Also, I love the new living room furniture. It looks great from the backyard.
Yeah, you better tip 20% or else I'm going to steal that couch.
I'm going to steal that couch. It looks soft as shit.
All right, everybody.
Pontiac Bandit.
Thank you so much for listening to the Oblivion Bar podcast. We'll see you in a few months here for episode 166.